A few months ago, I was cleaning up my wood stockpile and I find this fairly green log. It was beechwood, and I love beechwood, but I was just about done with the day. Now I couldn't let that log sit there and develop more cracks, as it already had been drying for a bit. In my infinite wisdom, I put it back on the lathe, and I do the most hasty green prep work I've ever done. If anything, this pulse made me realize that, like most problems in life, you have to come back and lay in the bed you made, but you can sure as well try to have some fun while you do that. Now, just like my wife on a bad day, I'm gonna go in and point to all the issues I see with this bowl. Moving on from that major crack that developed, I also have tear out. I have some unbalanced live edge on the side of this bowl, couple of knots I haven't accounted for, big chunk of wood missing, don't know where that went. I gotta do something about this before I start turning this bowl. The first trick with any square bowl is that all the defects on the outside of the wings can effectively be cut away. A lot of the cracks develop from the outside in, so cutting away the excess wings would preferably be the best way to tackle this problem. At the beginning of this video, you saw me mark those concentric circles. They will help me make sure that the two cuts I make on the wings are equally spaced from the center. Now, I've been wanting to upgrade my bandsaw for a while, but when it comes to tasks like this, the bandsaw works so well that I just cannot justify it. Even after those two cuts on the bandsaw, a lot of the defects I shared originally still exist in the bowl, and I still need to figure out a way to get around that. I will come back to it. Like most of my rough turn green bowls, I will be cutting a mortise out so I can flip this around and grab them on my chuck. You might be wondering what I do with the bowls I turn, and most often I just end up using them myself. You're having a party and you're juggling 3 dishes at once, the wings on a square bowl make excellent handles. However, because the wings extend past the bowl, you have to be more careful. I will slow down my feed rate so I don't leave a lot of tool marks when I'm done. That's all we need to do on this side. Time to flip it around and work on the back. Now, beech is one of my favorite woods to work with. It scrapes really well, cuts without tear out, and any burnish marks sand right off. However, it does have this bad tendency of just not being available anywhere. I locally source my wood. I always try to find trees that have been down and were being turned into firewood, and I use that wood to turn into bowls. These last sets of videos are pretty much the only beech wood I have, and I do regret not picking more up. So that's my advice to you. If you see beechwood, pick it up. I hope by the end of this video I can convince you that it's one of the best woods to work with. At this point, you're probably wondering how I decide the shape of my bowl. One of the things I take into consideration is obviously the design I set for myself those 6 months ago when I was rough turning this bowl. The other thing I do is, now that I have the final size of the bowl, I want to have the height in proportion to the width. To make that adjustment, you'll see me go deeper into the wings here, so I have a slightly taller bowl with thinner wings, because that just fit better with the proportions of this bowl. Again, going back to that earlier comment about being more cautious around the edges and the wings of this bowl, I'm cutting a lot of air at this point, so I gotta reduce my feed rate and make sure the wood has time to come down to the cutting tool to get a nice clean cut. Here I go back one more time to give the bowl slightly more height, and that really brings into perspective the whole design philosophy of bowls. I never have a particular design in mind. A lot of this just comes to you as you're turning. It is much like drawing a sketch. It's really up to you how you want to turn it and what feels good at that moment. This idea does change a little bit if you are doing production runs or turning a set. It's something I do want to experiment with, having certain limitations on the width and height of the bowl, the design pre-established. Maybe I'll try that someday, if you guys think that would be something worth watching. This standard scraper gives me a pretty nice surface, and this would be the last step before I start sanding on this side of the bowl. I do like the transition between the wings and the bowl. I think it is important to get that right. For the wings themselves, they can't be sanded while the bowl is spinning. I use a random orbital sander to do that. I sand the rest of the bowl as I usually would, and I use some shavings at the end to burnish the bowl and give it a nice polished look. It's time to apply some finish. This is by far my favorite step in this entire process, especially if I'm working with beechwood. The transformation is phenomenal, and I just can't get enough of this view. Okay, time to address these issues once and for all. Now, if I didn't hate myself, I would plane the top of the bowl down to below where the imperfections lie, but sometimes woodworkers are their own worst enemies. I'm sure you noticed most of the imperfections were towards the outside of the bowl. I could probably leave more wood towards the center and then taper outwards. This will leave me with narrower wings, but the imperfections on top of the edges will get cut away. The challenge here though would be blending this design with the smooth rim that I have planned for this bowl. I promise, these are not the ramblings of a madman, and if you stick around, I possibly can prove that to you. Because this is a wing bowl, I don't necessarily have visibility to the bottom of the bowl while I'm cutting on this end. With the lid turned off, I can trace the outside diameter of the bowl on this top. That will be a reference for where the rim begins. The second line helps me visualize a continuous curve right down to the center of the bowl. I can then connect all of these elements to give me a nice curve on the surface. Have you noticed how, depending on who you are talking to, you could show the same piece of work and get really different reactions? It happens to me a lot, especially with my bowls, and I think that's really cool. One thing I can say is that people can actually appreciate the beauty of natural wood. Having a quality built piece of woodwork in your hands, it's always undeniable. Sometimes I'll run into someone more analytical, so they want to know exactly how this bowl was made. How did the curves get where they are, and how was I able to put them there? Conversations like these are my favorite. My interest in starting this channel was to explore some more of that curiosity in the everyday person. Maybe you look at this bowl and start to think about how it was built and what techniques did we use to create this design that we can now hold, made out of simply wood and a desire. Maybe you could start your own YouTube channel and come back and tell me how, because I just can't seem to figure it out. Now that I have the bulk of the wood removed from the center of this bowl, I'm going to be moving on to a scraper. It's going to let me refine that curve and give me a lot more control. At this step in the process, I do not usually measure the thickness of my bowl. I have a general idea of how much wood I have to work with, and from there I can make the decision to either have a thicker or a thinner bowl. You can get calipers that will let you measure the exact thickness of your bowl. I don't have those, but I do recommend using them. After all that work, the last thing you want is to accidentally poke a hole to the bottom of that bowl. You will notice that I'm using my scraper on its side. This lets me cut slightly less wood at a time, and it's also a different kind of cut. It's perfect for blending those curves, and especially outside towards the wings where I'm cutting a lot of air, this will let me control how much wood I take off at a time. It also leaves behind a pretty smooth surface that I can then go on and sand. Because this is a square bowl, I do have to sand the edges by hand. The random orbital sander makes quick work of that. From there, it's my standard practice of using the electric sander and then burnishing the bowl with some shavings. For my finish, I'm using tung oil and then I'll put a coat of beeswax on it. But this again, like I said, it's my favorite part. The grain just pops with beechwood, and it's such a satisfying process to just apply this and let it absorb. I wait about 30 seconds after I have burnished it at higher speeds, and then I wipe away any excess. Then I do that same process with beeswax. It is that part of the video where I would like to ask you that if you've watched it this far, please consider subscribing. I plan to put out more videos like this one and even more entertaining wood turning videos in the future. So please help support this channel grow by becoming a subscriber or sharing your thoughts in the comments below. In any case, I would still like to thank you for making it this far into the video. I really appreciate that. And I also wanted to give a shout out to my current subscribers. I realized after my last video, a lot more of you guys subscribed to my channel, and I am so grateful for that. It makes me so happy that you think that the videos I put out are worth your time and your day, and you'd like to subscribe to the channel. I want to keep bringing you this entertaining content and build this community, so please stay tuned. And with that spiel, oh would you look at that, we are at the end of the video. It's not like I planned it or anything. But yeah, this is the finished bowl. If you like this, please let me know. I would really like to get some feedback. I think the grain is just amazing on this piece. I love the shape. It's a little asymmetrical, so it has that character in it as well. Overall, I think I'm really happy with how this turned out. Put a lot of time into sanding and finessing the curves. I think that all shows up at the end. Please let me know what you think. If you like the bowl, please like the video. It really helps out and it tells me that I'm doing something right. Appreciate your time. Catch you on the next one.